Hello and welcome to another installation of the Aurora Dialogues, a series of conversations that brings together leaders in the field to discuss pressing humanitarian topics. My name is Armina Thayan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative. Since its founding in 2015, Aurora has supported grassroots humanitarians through a $1 million prize, which they then reallocate among fellow humanitarians and organizations, continuing the cycle of giving. We at Aurora believe that these individuals are uniquely positioned to determine how humanitarian funding gets allocated. We seek to partner with them to help those in the greatest need. Today is World Humanitarian Day, a UN-designated celebration of the spirit of resilience, compassion, and humanity. I can't think of a better day to come together to honor humanitarians the world over who find themselves in the most dire situations, giving of themselves, risking their own lives to help and ultimately save the lives of others. They do this today against the backdrop of the greatest humanitarian funding gap on record, and still they embody the best of humanity day in and day out. For that reason, we thank them for their compassion, commitment, and kindness. Today's dialogue will be moderated by the incredible Anna Guel, Managing Editor at DevEx. You're in for a treat today. She and her panelists have such deep experience that it's sure to be an engaging conversation. Thank you to Anna, the panelists, and everyone who's joined us for Around the World to take a beat, pause, reflect, and engage on this most important day. Together, we can emphasize the human and humanitarian for the better of the world. Thank you once more and enjoy the conversation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us, and thank you, Armine, for that kind introduction. I am Anna Guel, Managing Editor at DevEx, which is the media platform for over 1 million global development professionals, and I'm very pleased to be moderating this Aurora Dialogues discussion focused on the people who are so indispensable to our sector, which of course are the humanitarians. These are the people who brave incredible dangers to help those in crisis, and those crises from war and conflict to natural disasters are higher than ever. Yet funding is failing to keep up with the unprecedented need, and the risks for humanitarians are unprecedented as well. 2023 was the deadliest year on record for humanitarian workers, and unfortunately 2024 is set to be even worse. To reflect on these challenges, we have an esteemed panel of speakers who've joined us today and who I'd like to introduce. We have Patricia McElreevy, who is President and CEO of the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, which helps donors maximize their impact through more intentional giving in response to domestic and international disasters. Prior to joining CDP, she served as Vice President of the Humanitarian team at Interaction, and her 30-year career in the humanitarian field began when she joined USAID's Office of U.S. Foreign Disaster Assistance in 1993. And then speaking of USAID, we have Colin Thomas Jensen, who is National Security Director at the agency, where he advises the administrator on national security issues. Prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, he worked at the U.S. Institute of Peace, West Exec Advisors, and served as a senior policy advisor to the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations. We also are pleased to have Dr. Sakana Yacobi, who is Executive Director of the Afghan Institute of Learning, which she founded in 1995 in response to the lack of education and healthcare opportunities in Afghanistan after decades of war and conflict. So let's start with the question for each of our panelists. As we reflect on World Humanitarian Day, what do you believe has been the most significant change in the humanitarian sector over the past decade, and how has that influenced your work? Patty, perhaps we can start with you.
Great, Anna, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here speaking on this panel. On today, which is an especially important day to humanitarians in terms of just really remembering the risks that so many face as they do the work to try and help their fellow humans. So I think it's just really such a valuable day to be having this conversation. And the most significant change, it's really multi-layered. I mean, it's hard to say like which is the one change. I think realistically, we're doing more than we've ever done before in places that in the past were inaccessible. But that begs the question of why we're needed. I think that's really the challenge for me is, this most significant change is how vast the need is at the moment for humanitarians. This year's theme of Act for Humanity really highlights it. And as you yourself said already, Anna, it's becoming more and more of a dangerous profession to be in. And that's a challenge as well. I mean, international humanitarian law is not being followed in the way that anyone would like it to be. It was established to protect civilians and those who provide aid during conflicts. However, there's a flagrant disregard, which I think is another reason why this multi-layering of the change that's come into the sector. We're in more places, but there's more impunity. There's more disregard for law, for the law of protecting people. There's also more violations. They go unpunished. It creates an environment where impunity thrives. And this lack of accountability, of course, on today, we're talking about what it does for humanitarians, but 364 days of the year, we're talking about what it does for the civilians who are impacted, who the humanitarians are trying to help. And that's, of course, incredibly difficult and really challenging for all of us in terms of a change. If I may just talk for a moment about what CDP does in terms of trying to help with organizations with this change, is really looking at funding proximate organizations to implement community design solutions and calling on philanthropy to be a lot more creative in looking at this multi-layering, at looking at the complexity of this environment and looking at how they can help within this environment to, not only look at the safety and security of aid workers, but also to examine that issue you raised, which is the lack of funding. There's not enough money there for communities right now. So we have more need, we have more access, we have more risk, and we have less money. And those are challenges that exist for us. I think humanitarian organizations can't be called upon to fix these problems, the crises that are out there, but we have to ask donors to fund the tools to navigate the knock-on effects that happen as a result of these crises, but for both the organizations themselves, but also the communities that these organizations are serving.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And Colin, likewise, what are some of the changes that you've witnessed and how has that impacted your work?
Thanks very much. Very happy to be here. I think for me, the biggest difference I've seen in the last 10 to 15 years is the deterioration in any kind of consensus around the importance of allowing humanitarian actors to reach vulnerable populations wherever they are. It's not that denial of humanitarian assistance is anything new. We've seen this for decades and centuries, but that the institutions that we've established to uphold international peace and security, and I think most important there is the Security Council, in this age of great power competition and increasing rivalry between the 5 permanent members, particularly between the United States, UK, France, and Russia and China, has created a situation in which we really have a very difficult time getting consensus when a state actor is denying humanitarian assistance to its population. We've been not able to get consensus around a series of steps to take to isolate that government, to push it to act and to work. From Syria, we had an example of denial of access, and then a Security Council resolution that established a mechanism for cross-border assistance into northwestern Syria. Since I've been at USAID this time, we've had, and I'm looking at my notes here, at least 3 instances of almost a siege-like mentality by a government and a failure of the international community to respond aggressively. The first was Ethiopia, in Tigray, where the government destroyed the bridges that would allow international humanitarian actors to move food and other commodities into Tigray, and then blocked the one road in for months and months. The second, Nagorno-Karabakh, where the government of Azerbaijan essentially blocked the Leshine corridor, did not allow any movement of goods back and forth along the corridor of humanitarian goods, and we saw how that population was severely weakened and ultimately violently expelled. And then right now in Sudan, where the government of Sudan has, despite having no control over its western border with Chad, has closed the border. We're hopeful that that's changing soon, but in all of these instances, our efforts to use the Security Council, to use other international institutions to put pressure and to create mechanisms to allow for humanitarian assistance to reach those populations has been stymied by an inability to reach a kind of consensus there. How it's affected our work? Well, I think in a number of ways it's affected our work. I'll talk about one, and that is with an inability for international actors to reach these populations. I think we are now seeing a growing effort to support local actors and local mutual aid organizations that are doing that work when international organizations can't get there. I'll use Sudan as a good example, where following the eruption of conflict in Khartoum in April, many humanitarian organizations left the country, international staff left the country, and local humanitarian actors were traumatized. Their families might have been under siege. They might have left the country, but many Sudanese, ordinary Sudanese, younger Sudanese patriots decided to stay when they could have left and stood up something called emergency response rooms. And these are small mutual aid organizations, very local, that are providing food and other life-saving assistance to Sudanese who are caught up in conflict. Here at AID, we've really prioritized creativity around how to move money quickly to these organizations. It's not something that we are adept at doing, but we understand that Sudan is probably the way things are going to be going in a lot of other places in the world, and that the mechanisms that we're trying to put in place to support emergency response rooms in Sudan will likely be used in other theaters, unfortunately.
Thanks, Colin. I'm so glad you mentioned Sudan, which by so many measures is the worst, if not one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world at the moment, and doesn't get nearly as much attention as so many other crises. So it's there's a lot of difficult attention span when it comes to so many things going wrong. But let's go to Dr. Jacobi. What is some of the changes you've seen over the years, and how has that influenced your work in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Anna. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. First of all, I want to thank Aurora that gave us this opportunity, especially in this kind of crisis that we are facing every day. The population all around the world and all the community and nation, they have to really be aware of this, that what is going on around the world, that how much people are suffering. And this is one way to get our word around, and that was a great opportunity given by Aurora to us. And what is the challenges? We, as I personally, as Afghan person, as citizen of Afghanistan, I really tell you that Afghanistan is suffering a lot. Afghanistan is a country that is out of the radar. And one other big challenge is that all our assets has been frozen. And I understand why, but the problem is that the people of Afghanistan has nothing to do with political situation. The people of Afghanistan has nothing to do with the nature. The people of Afghanistan has nothing to do with differences. For example, color, religion, ethnicity, whatever. The people are suffering. And so as a result, what's happened, they are in a corner that they are out of the radar and they are starving. For example, I just want to share with you a little bit of a story. For example, in a country that you see in a family, that first of all, the father is gone because of the war, has been killed. The mother is sick on the corner of the house. 5 children are there. And those 5 children, 2 are on the street trying to grab any garbage that they could get from the street and to bring it home to feed their sibling. And one sibling is only 12 years old, sitting and having a pot and sitting and washing clothes from other people to earn some money to feed her brother and sister and her sick mother. How do you think this kind of situation can be solved if there is not creativity on giving humanitarian assistance, if not creating creativity to be able to disperse the humanitarian assistance around the world in the area that is the most needed? For example, I am telling you, one of the reasons I really myself, for 33 years, I have been working in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, working mainly in area of education and health. In the last 4 years, half of my work is humanitarian work. Why? Because I go door to door, I go 10 to 10. People are starving, people are dying. There is no job, there is no opportunity. There are sick children, there are sick women. You know, the victim of all these issues is women and children. And when you see them in that situation, how could you turn off and say, sorry, we don't have money, and we don't have money? There is a lack of money, lack of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. Yes, there is some assistance come by UN or by some other humanitarian that they say that there, but there is not going to the places that it should go. Community after community, they are suffering. There are no international organization anymore. All international organization left. UN cannot reach all those people. And first of all, second, those people are so in different community, in different villages, that they don't, because of their life, they don't dare to go there because they are scared. My point is that why we are working on humanitarian if we don't have dedication? Why we are working on humanitarian issue if we don't go from our heart, from feeling that we have for this individual, he or she is a human being? Why? Humanity is something that teaches us to every direction, from every text that you have in every nation, that we must be connected with each other. We must help each other. We must reach out, no matter which color, which religion, which language we are talking. But what's happening to Afghanistan? Aren't the people of Afghanistan are human beings? Aren't humanity is required that we as a citizen reach out for each other and hold their hand the day that they are in need? My concern is that please do not let Afghanistan to fall out of the radar. Afghanistan, yes, I know there is a lot of crisis around the world. I know Gaza, I know Palestine, I know Sudan, I know Syria, I know all those issues. But also Afghanistan is one of those countries that we don't have enough job, we don't have enough opportunity. The women, half of the population are women in a country that is a 35 million population. Half of those people are women and children. They are sitting home, locked at home without any income, without any assistance. And that is something that I really believe that the world should be aware of it. Don't ignore Afghanistan. Don't ignore Afghan women. Don't ignore Afghan children. You promised them not only that as a humanity concept, you cannot forget the people of Afghanistan. We are all human. We have to reach out for each other. And that is my burning. I really, every time that I see those situations, I weep, I cry. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, you know the situation about Afghanistan. I do not want to talk about it. But the issue is that why the world is not waking up? Why the world is completely ignore us? And that is my challenge is that is we don't have enough funding at all. Every time I turn my face and go to the funder, as a matter of fact, some of the funders are pulling out their fund because of the system. They don't like the system, and they are pulling out their funding because of the system. What the people of Afghanistan are not the system. They are the population that they are in need. They suffer. Do you know that this year in Afghanistan, there was a drought once, and then also there was flood. In a country that has flood, no service available. We went to Baghlan, to Nimruz, to area that, and to Orion, the area that there was not one single person was helping. That is the area that we went, and we didn't have that much. Whatever we could, we provided, but we didn't reach 1/4 of those people because they are in disaster. And that's I'm trying to tell that humanitarian should be very creative, should be giving disturbing into the dispersing to the area that the people localization is there, local organization are there, should be given to the local organization, should be given to the country that has been out of the radar. It should be given to that. And that is my challenge today.
Yeah. What's an important challenge, and those are some very powerful words and a powerful plea. So, well, thank you, and we'll get back to you as well with some further questions. But I wanted to go back to you, Patty, with a more specific question. What are some of the, since you deal with disaster response specifically, what are some of the key challenges in mobilizing resources for disaster response, both in the philanthropic center, both to direct aid more effectively, both domestically and internationally, including through anticipatory cash transfers, which people may not be that familiar with?
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to just highlight Dr. Jacoby's words about it's unfortunate that we are always seeking to prioritize what disasters are more needy or more important. And I think that's an area where with philanthropy, we try very hard to work with, which is their understanding of disasters and crises. And it's constantly evolving how philanthropy engages on these, but we really try and also get philanthropy to understand that it's about actively that they have a role that they can play in and should play in actively helping communities, either communities close to home or communities further from home. But that's actually a key part and a really important part of being a philanthropist who cares about these issues. The other thing that we really work with philanthropy on is kind of moving away from it's someone else's lane, right? It's you know, we care about community development, or we care about social justice, or we care about education, but humanitarianism or disasters, that's someone else's job. And we're trying to pull it back to say, actually, disasters are merely the Achilles heel of development. It is when we don't invest enough, when we don't look at the vulnerabilities that communities have from physical, social, political, environmental, economic risks, whatever they may be. We are often very much aware of what the vulnerabilities of communities before they become a disaster, before they become a humanitarian crisis. And so the question for philanthropy is often like, challenge it. When you're seeing that this risk is not being addressed in your programming or in someone else's programming, philanthropy has this amazing ability to actually be outspoken, to push the US government, to push the United Nations, to push others to say, why are we not doing this more? Why are we not looking at this? And also modeling behavior, such as you talked about, anticipatory cash transfers, looking at new types of programming. You know, saying you're not willing to take this risk, we are. You're not willing to believe that system change can happen with localization, we are. We're going to model that behavior. We're going to show you that actually you can be a responsible steward of your funds through different types of activities. You don't have to keep doing it the same way we've always done it before. With philanthropy as well, it's about looking at exploring what type of giving aligns with their mission and values. We can't look to philanthropy to solve all the world's ills. Of course we can't, but we can ask philanthropy to open their aperture a bit, to look a bit more broadly. Where else can they help? What programs do they have that can go further? What is that they can do to take those chances, to be a wedge into the system, to fund innovation, and more importantly, to accept failure. You know, we talk often about failure. The aid community loves to navel gaze about what we've done wrong, but we actually aren't very good at saying, well, it was just the wrong time for that. Let's try it again. Let's do it again. Venture capitalists, they won't invest in something until it's failed 4, 5, 6 times, right? These are the very same people who often are philanthropists. So how do we get them to take that same risk mindset and bring it into our sphere and to say, we're okay. Not everything is going to succeed, but we need to be creative. If we're going to listen to communities for community solutions, we can't always be listening for the same thing, right? If you're going in with a hammer, you're looking for nails. But we don't want to be looking for nails. We want to open the toolbox. We want to say to the community, what is it you require and how do we help you get there? Because that is what really community-led means. It's not saying we have the answers. It's saying we're here to listen and figure out together how we can move this forward. And those blue sky times are so critical. That time before those vulnerabilities I spoke about, before those vulnerabilities become the disaster, before they meet the hazard and the disaster or the humanitarian crisis is created, That's the time for this planning. That's the time for trust building with communities. That's the time for identifying your purpose, your priorities. It's for philanthropy to look at what partners they want to work with, pre-vetting them, building that trust so that when those moments come, which unfortunately they will on all too many places across the globe, domestically in the United States and internationally, how are you pre-positioning yourself to be prepared to help, to be a support? Not to come in and say, I've got the answers, but to actually say, you got this, I know you got this, here's how I can help. And that's what I think philanthropy really is shifting towards, and where I think we're going to make the most difference is being that actor on behalf of communities to say, we've got your back, what do you need us for? And I think that innovation is just really where we're going to see the change for the system.
Yeah, no, I think we've written quite a bit about it. The innovations in philanthropy are really impressive. And as you said, so much of that is building resilience before the inevitable, unfortunately, disaster. There's, unfortunately, something always bad happens, but building up that resilience and having those partnerships in place beforehand as opposed to afterward is so critical. So I think that that's such an important perspective. Colin, turning over to you in your role at USAID, how do you balance immediate humanitarian needs with long-term national security interests? And in your experience, what are some of the ways that you've found to be effective in terms of providing aid in conflict zones and fragile settings?
Sure. Thanks for that question. I think the first thing just to say right at the top is whether or not there's a national security imperative in a given setting, there's a humanitarian imperative that is something that the United States and USAID in particular has to uphold. I see our role in the interagency where the various national security agencies, and I think USAID is a national security agency, where we discuss and come to consensus usually, hopefully, on how to respond to a given crisis, that USAID is the voice in the room that is making sure that whatever our national security response is to a given crisis is taking into full account the humanitarian situation, the need to get assistance to people who are desperate, and most importantly, the need not to do anything in the national security space that would do harm to that effort. So I see that as, and particularly with the administrator's elevation to a full role in the National Security Council, that our engagement in that process is in many ways our most effective way of ensuring that a humanitarian voice is at the table in national security discussions. We also have to recognize that many of the places we work, Afghanistan, Yemen, the Sahel, Somalia, Haiti, these are places where the United States does have a compelling national security interest, and we do want to do things to isolate various actors who are engaged in either waging war, atrocities, and in many of these cases, engaging in terrorism or plotting attacks against U.S. interests or the interests of our allies. One of the ways in which we've tried to address this, what the U.S. government often tries to address this, is through sanctions. And we've seen in many cases the sanctions, the discussion around sanctions and the discussion around the need to continue to provide assistance to populations have butted heads. In this administration, we've worked really hard, and our Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, working very closely with the White House and our mission in New York, to come up with a way to provide general licenses to humanitarian organizations who are working in places like Somalia and Yemen, places where we might have designated a non-state actor as a terrorist group or foreign terrorist organization, where potentially providing assistance to those actors, whether willfully or not, could be a violation of U.S. sanctions. We've worked to make sure that our partners, the organizations that we rely on to deliver U.S. assistance to people in need, are protected from potential sanctions violations if they're in fact providing that humanitarian assistance on the ground. So it's something that we deal with every day. When a new crisis pops up and we have a new discussion around how to respond, it's always first and foremost, how do we make sure that we're getting assistance, even in situations where the areas that are controlled by these non-state actors potentially would potentially be a sanctions violation, trying to protect our partners. In terms of delivering aid effectively in conflict settings, I think the biggest thing right now is understanding that you have to work both at a high level with the leadership of the groups that are denying assistance, whether that's a government or a non-state actor. In the case of Sudan, the Administrator Power, has engaged regularly and routinely with both the Sudanese Armed Forces leadership and the leadership of the Rapid Support Forces, the two warring parties, neither of whom are facilitating the delivery of assistance to the Sudanese people. But you've also got to marry that up with an effective ground game, understanding that particularly in places where armed actors might not have effective command and control, simply getting a commitment from leadership to allow humanitarian access is not enough when you have individual humans with their own calculus and calculations making decisions about areas in which they're operating. And so having both a high level policy push married with a ground game to engage local commanders and those who are actually making the decisions about whether a truck can go from point A to point B is the way in which we're trying to, at least in Sudan and many other places, trying to work these issues on the ground.
Yeah. And it just goes to the point of having a holistic approach to these crises. So very important. Dr. Yacobi, going back to you, I wanted to have a specific question. It's been 3 years since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. Do you advocate for more international engagement with the Taliban, which is something that some governments are hesitant to do, many governments, because including the U.S., because of their treatment of women and girls? Do you think the U.S. international community should be working with the Taliban to help the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Anna, for this question. First, I want to answer your question in this regard. I have my hand tied. Right now, I am functioning inside Afghanistan, and you know in what kind of circumstances I work. But also, I want to let you know that we are working in that system right now. We are operating in every direction. We do work on health. We do work on education. We do work on humanitarian. One of the reasons that we are working because we never, under all the system, previous system, we work. We didn't get involved with politics. And right now we are not involved in politics. So although we operate, we have to have a right paper that we operate. For example, right now, all the school for girls are closed. All the women are sitting home, but we are operating. We have our TV station is operating in teaching every class from 1st grade through 12th grade. Everyone can sit behind their TV screen and they can watch. We were flexible and we said we are going to do this and nobody stopped us. Do we want an international community to go there? Do we want the US to go? Of course we want. We want everyone to go there and be able to provide service to the people of Afghanistan. But this is not for us because we have this wall and we are behind this wall. We are operating in a way that we are flexible and different way. For example, when I told you we are working, this is 4 years that this system is operating in Afghanistan. Under these 4 years, half of my work has been turning to humanitarian assistance. Half of it, more than half of it. Why? Because we are visionary, we are flexible, we are creative. We don't stick in one system like Pat said, that we were doing what we were doing. We are not doing that. We are looking what is the need there, how we can operate that, how we can transfer our little asset that we have in a different area that is needed. So that is we are doing. And we are allowed to do that because we are working with the system and flexibility. We are not saying they are good or they are bad. We are not doing any of those things because we have to operate. Right now, I have 800 personnel working inside Afghanistan and 19 provinces of Afghanistan. Their life is in my hand and my life is in their hand. So my point is that I do not want to jeopardize their life, but they are functioning. They are going to every corner. They are not scared. They are taking risk. But the board has to know that there are times that politicians do their works. People who want to run power, they do their works. But we are there to provide service for the people. We are there to provide service under any circumstance that we could. And so for that reason, we face many challenges that I even hard for me to talk to you about it. But the situation is our funding is so limited. Believe me, I mean, we are right now creating jobs for women inside their houses, and we are doing a lot of skill training, and we provide service that they will be able to sell their product outside and be able to work inside the house because they could not be outside the house. So this, you know how tough it is, you know how hard is this, but we don't scare of it, and we keep doing it door to door. We go everywhere. But the problem, we need that funding. I want to talk to Patricia that she said that we need to really sort of multi-layer, work in different level. And also she said that we have to be visionary. That is the way that philanthropic should be visionary, to see how they can spread this asset to the people who are not able to get this asset. How they can spread this asset to the people who are not work with the high official in this country or that country. We have to be visionary. As a social entrepreneur, I'm a visionary individual. As soon as I see the situation, I create another way to get to there, no matter what. Find out a way, find out with my staff to get to that point that I need to be there, whichever way I could. I think that philanthropists should be doing, humanitarians should be doing it, and we all have to help hand together. We are for that purpose, all of us serving the people, and we should work together, not against each other.
Right. Well, it's so commendable. Yeah, it's so commendable, the work that you're doing on the ground in spite of such difficult circumstances. And I think it's important that we are discussing it today.
But Anna, I tell you one thing. I don't need to be, I don't need to get the recognition. I don't need any of these things. I need to reach to those people in whatever way I could. Just that's what I'm saying to you. Our brother Colin knows what I am talking about. He knows about my country. Okay, all of you know, but he knows more than any of you, and he knows how I work. I know the people who are in that line of work, they know how AIL is working. And the moment that everybody is screaming about human rights, whatever, we are working with those women. We are working. And I want the world knows that the women who are sitting inside the house, they are learning. We have from first grade through 12th grade through our TV station. Now we develop another program. We are teaching university for women and 4 departments. And right now that is operating right now in our TV in this year. And now we are working online university. That's we are doing. We believe that education is the key issue to create an environment that people will not suffer that much that they are suffering. But it's not easy. It's not easy when you don't have enough funding. I hate to ask that. I hate to say so much about funding because it's mean like I'm begging, but I think humanitarian assistance is not something about begging. It's about something you feel. You are dedicated. You feel responsible. You feel immoral if you don't do your job. That's my job to do it. That's my job. That's how I feel. I'm not begging people give me funding for this kind of thing. I am just saying this is my responsibility. I feel that with my bone, you know?
Right. And I think those are some powerful words for all humanitarians as well, that feel it's their duty. Wanted to, of course, there is this burning need among humanitarians to do what's right to help, but they face really a slew of challenges, which we've alluded to before, like donor apathy in terms of the funding, politicization of aid, and of course, these heightened safety and security concerns for humanitarian workers. Patty, perhaps we can circle back to you. What are some of the strategies that you've used to address all of this slew of challenges that humanitarian workers face now?
Anna, so before I begin, I just want to thank you and Aurora for the framing of the question. All too often, what's talked about is donor fatigue as the decrease in funding, as if they're too tired. What of those who are living through the crises? What of those who are responding within these disasters? Are they not also tired? I mean, what this idea that somehow donors being tired is enough not to any longer support. Apathy, that's the right word. I hate to say it, but let's be honest with ourselves. Let's actually use the words that are right. Staying informed, recharging our empathy banks. These are choices. They're, choices we make, and they can be made for various reasons. And I recognize that there's drivers for giving, media, scale, proximity. If you get into some, more institutional donors or bilateral donors, you get into also geopolitical rationales. And there's a lot of reasons for giving, but it's not often fatigue. It is about a choice that's being made where we're going to assist. And we give, donors can turn away because of these narratives. The situation's too political. The situation, somehow even worse than that, sometimes we turn away because we think somehow it's their people's fault. Why did they build there? What were they thinking, right? These are narratives that we've given to ourselves to allow ourselves to somewhat feel better. But when realistically, we should be suffering as, if we're not able to help, we might not always be in a position to help, but we should still feel. Right. So, we want to make sure that's why I like the term apathy. But I just want to go back to the remainder of your question. Limits on access, politicized aid, heightened security concerns. It's at these moments that I feel donors are at their least, where we see donors being less generous, less innovative, less trusting, because there's less access. There's maybe, concerns about where the money might be going. There's fraud issues, there's security. But those are exactly the moments when we need more. We need more innovation. We need more creativity. We need more ability to have unrestricted funds, to support things, to not have that ratio that everyone likes in terms of a nice matrix of how we're going to come out with such great results. We need to be able to say, in this environment, where it's actually really, really hard to be a donor is the place we need you to be at your best. And then the same for humanitarians. I think humanitarians themselves have to be at their best at this moment. They have to be more vocal. They have to be more creative. They have to be more coordinated. Something it's not also, the system doesn't necessarily encourage us to be, right? But we have to be there. We have to be looking at how do we actually go back to the donors with more support of how their initiatives are helping, how we are going to work together, how we're not going to put them in a difficult position of competition. We're going to actually avoid duplication, all of these things. And some of the ways I've seen this happen is you have unified statements on needs. You have unified statements on action that's going to be taken. You have coordinated advocacy. You have coordinated requests related to waivers, as Colin talked about, the general licenses, those kind of things, or NGOs, UN getting together and saying, hey, we need actually special permissions in these areas. The environment is not conducive to us working within the parameters you've set forth. These new types of funding approaches really saying, for years, cash vouchers were blocked. No one believed in it. No one trusted it. But it was through actually organizations saying, we're going to take a chance. We're going to do this. We now see it more and more and more. Requests for it, looking at it. Localization, the same. Initially, years and years, people blocking it, saying, well, can we really trust it? Is it going to work as well as we'd like? And now we see calls, more and more calls for empowering localization. These are great examples of when we are at our best and where we actually, it's a coordination of the donors and the organizations on the ground, including, of course, the proximate organizations, really being aligned on solutions and saying, we're going to put aside how hard this is for us. We're going to find ways to work within what we have and do more with it. And sometimes that is doing more with less, right? But I will always fight against, especially from philanthropy's perspective, that we don't have enough. Last year alone, there was $499 billion in given out for philanthropy. Now that doesn't, very, very small percentage of that comes to humanitarian or disasters, but that's a lot of money, $49 billion. The UN appeal last year for all the countries in the world would have been funded with the cost of 2 Halloweens in the United States. Okay, so we're not talking about enormous amounts of money. Yes, it's big for you or I, but it's not big globally for us to consider when we compare it to other scales of economy. What is the needs for us to actually, be a supportive human race to each other is actually manageable if we just really open ourselves to what are the choices we're making and how we're investing. And I'm not against Halloween. It's not that I don't want people to have things for themselves and to celebrate, but it's also about trying to put those numbers into perspective, because I think all too often we focus on these numbers as unattainable. And I think we need to change our narrative and say, actually, these numbers are obtainable. It's just, do we tell the story well enough that people believe in why they are part of this common good and how we should all be helping each other?
Right. Now, Colin, in terms of donors, USAID has so many people coming at it, really, because, and he just premier USAID agency. How do you deal with these challenges, especially within, such a large government apparatus that can be complicated, that's hugely important, but can also be slow because, like all government agencies, it can be bureaucratic. How do you deal with these challenges specifically at USAID?
Well, I mean, picking up on something that that Patty said and I alluded to earlier, I think in this era that we're entering into, the importance of figuring out how to accelerate assistance to and empower local actors in humanitarian response is going to be critical over the coming years. When Sudan and when Khartoum, when the violence started in Khartoum in April, probably within the first week, I was having a conversation with a colleague and I said something to the effect of, I think we're going to need a white helmets for Sudan, referring to the White Helmet organization that grew up in Syria, made up of medical professionals who have saved thousands of lives, pulling people out of rubble, providing medical care. I said this because I had a feeling, having worked on Sudan for many years, that humanitarian access was going to be a challenge, that Khartoum was probably going to be largely destroyed in this conflict, and sadly that's come true. But where now I regret having made that statement is, it's not that we need a white helmet, it's that we need whatever the Sudanese are going to come up with. And we need to, instead of trying to impose a solution that we've seen work somewhere else in a new setting, we need to work with those local actors, listen to them, listen to their needs and what they're trying to do, and then try to, revise, amend our system to be more responsive and more capable in responding to those needs. It's something that's going to take time, as Patty knows, and as Anna knows. We have a very aggressive localization agenda here in this administration at USAID. We've set aggressive targets. That's same for our humanitarian work, but it's really hard. It's kind of like it is bureaucracy, as you said. It's like turning an aircraft carrier to try to get new, more innovative approaches. But in a place like Sudan, where we see such overwhelming need, and it is, I think, by any metric, the world's worst humanitarian crisis right now, this is an area where we're putting a lot of energy, because we recognize, number one, not just now, but these are the actors that are probably going to be helping to rebuild the country when this conflict ends. These Sudanese who have stayed behind, who have not left the country when they could have, who have instead banded together and formed small organizations to provide assistance. This is the new civil society in Sudan. And if there's one kind of silver lining in this conflict, and a very thin one, I think, it's that we have seen this extraordinary mobilization of people, of ordinary citizens, with that humanitarian impulse that Dr. Yakubi so eloquently spoke to, who just simply couldn't look away and who felt that they had to do something. And it's our responsibility as a donor in this space, not just to provide funding to the WFPs of the world and the international rescue committees of the world, who are doing incredible work and trying to scale that work, as we're doing right now, but also to figure out ways in which to funnel resources, to funnel expertise, to funnel capacity to local actors who are in many ways very much on the front lines of providing assistance in a devastating situation. And I think, sadly, given the dynamics that I spoke to earlier in the international system and this kind of failure to uphold any kind of consensus around adherence to international humanitarian law, it's getting these actors and empowering these actors in places like Sudan and the DRC and the Sahel that is likely going to be our best chance of saving as many lives as possible going forward.
I'm so glad you brought up the issue of localization, which we hadn't really touched on. It's obviously not a new concept, but the movement around it, the re-energized movement, I should say, is really an interesting trend that we've been following so closely, and credit to USAID and Administrator Samantha Power for really shining such a spotlight on it and holding yourselves accountable to targets, which not everyone does. So, but we do have, I wanted to switch gears. I know we don't have much time left, but we do have a question from the audience that Dr. Yakubi, I think that this would be a great question for you, which is, as a humanitarian, how do you maintain this balance between your professional work and your personal life? Because obviously your work takes such a toll on you personally. What has that been like for you in your day-to-day and in your personal life to see, such suffering?
Well, this is a great question, but my point is that my suffering compared to the people who are inside the country are suffering is nothing, because I really believe that when you see people all around you are suffering, then you just feel, who am I talk about my suffering? Yes, it is very hard. It is 24/7 kind of work. Constantly you are working after trying to, as Pat says, trying to reach to the donor to make that they have the empathy, they have the feeling to just for these people. It's a hard work. Day after day, and go and talk about it and try to convince them that, listen, this system is something you don't agree, but what is wrong with the people? People are people. People are suffering. We need to reach out for these people. This is not an easy task. I tell you, Anna, I really feel that my heart is completely just like constantly squeezing, like I'm just tear in my eyes, and I don't have no way to get relief from that. It is not one area. Yes, right now, as Colin says, people over there are dying because of not having enough sufficient clinics and doctors and nurses. All of the people who were providing internationally, they left the country. Those people who are there, they are the citizen of that country. They are the one who left there. They are the one who stay there. They are the one who are in need. How could I close my eyes to say, okay, this clinic doesn't need anything, we go to the, we have to divide whatever medicine we have, whatever assistance we have. Our hospital, just this last month, we saw 7,000 patients in one hospital, a small hospital. It is a lot of patients. We have about 80 personnel in that hospital. Around the clock, they were working. And it's free of charge because people don't have no money to pay for their medicine or for the service. People don't have job. Men are out of work. There is no work for those people. And a lot of women, most of them that were working before, providing support for their family, they are sitting home now. They are locked inside the house. And they were the breadwinner of their family, most of them. And that is the situation. So I think you can see my situation, how I deal with day-to-day life. And that is the way. And I don't say I'm the only one. Every humanitarian maybe is like that. But you see, this is to have humanitarian and also providing service with health, providing service with education, providing help with the children, handicap. Our handicap center is completely, the patients there are dying because the nurses that they were there, they are gone. Right now, we are trying to get more nurses. They want more money, and we don't have it. And those handicapped people, they are not able to function. They don't have limb. They don't have hand. They cannot talk. They cannot move. They need 24/7 assistance. And so we are suffering like that. I mean, thousands of children are orphaned in our orphanage. The doors just like open, and children are in the street going to beg on the street. It's horrible, the situation. I'm just trying. I might, a lot of people who are listening to me right now maybe say, well, she is constantly sort of talking about problem. Problem is there. You cannot ignore this problem. Afghanistan is suffering right now. Afghan people are suffering. Afghanistan have been out of the radar. They don't talk about Afghanistan. Nobody talk about Afghanistan. Every country that you go talk about it, say, well, we don't work with this system. We cannot fund you for this reason. So what we are going to do, how we are going to do it. And that's the issue right now. That's my suffering. Thank you, Anna. I'm sorry.
No, it's a powerful personal perspective, and you're right. You know, Afghanistan has fallen off the radar, and the funding is so critical. We are running short on time, but Colin and Patty, perhaps we could also get some final thoughts, a quick 1-minute thought on World Humanitarian Day and some of the things that we've discussed today. Colin, perhaps we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just would like to close with, this is a day to think both about the extraordinary scale of the need and to try to refill the well of our empathy, particularly as we sit far away from these places. I have a job where I'm very much focused on policy and spend a lot of time talking to other people in our government and not really enough time out in the field. But I have to constantly remind myself and remind others that the decisions that we make at a high level on policy have real impacts on real people in the world. And then second, just to say that, you know, we've talked about this, it is a more and more dangerous time to do this work. And for the people who are on the front lines, and I like Patty, I've worked for OFDA, I've spent time on disaster assistance response teams in Darfur and in Haiti. That's challenging work, and it's even more challenging now with this kind of degradation and adherence to IHL. And so to thank humanitarian workers for their courage, whether international or local staff, and to say on behalf of USAID that, you know, we're here and we support you and the incredible and important work that you do.
Great. And Patty, perhaps we can conclude with you.
So thank you for hosting this event. I'd like to donate my time to a moment of silence in honor of those who've lost their lives in this year and in prior years, international, national, civilians, whoever have worked to help their neighbors at their most trying time. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. I think that's a poignant way, an important way for us to conclude this discussion. I want to thank our panelists for all of your insightful comments, and of course, thank the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative for hosting today's event. As you may know, Aurora is a foundation that seeks to address on-the-ground humanitarian challenges around the world with a focus on helping the most destitute. Each year, an Aurora Prize laureate is honored with a $1 million prize and is given the opportunity to continue that cycle of giving by using those funds to support very important grassroots humanitarians who give a second chance to people in need. Of course, I want to thank our audience online who joined us today for a discussion. We hope you found it informative and useful as we mark this very important occasion of honoring humanitarians around the world. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.